We return now to the most recent shakeup by President Trump of his national security leadership. What change will John Bolton bring to the job of National Security Advisor? For that, we get two views. Nancy McEldowney was a career Foreign Service officer and ambassador to Bulgaria. She served on the National Security Council staff during the Clinton administration and is now director of Georgetown University's Master of Science in Foreign Service program. And Matthew Kroenig worked for the Office of the Secretary of Defense during the Bush and Obama years and at the CIA. He's now a professor of government at Georgetown University. And we welcome both of you to the NewsHour. Nancy McEldowney, to you first. What do you think of the choice of John Bolton for this job?
I think John Bolton is a spectacularly bad choice for this job. He is a hardline nationalist. He is someone with disdain for diplomacy. He is almost a knee-jerk advocate for war. Whatever problem you look at, from North Korea to Iran, even to Russia, he's talked about war against all of these countries. And when you look at a White House that is already leaning in a very extreme direction, with a president who seems inclined to make decisions that isolate the United States even further, John Bolton is going to take us in the wrong direction.
Matthew Kroenig, what's your take on John Bolton?
Well, first, I'd like to thank H.R. McMaster for his service to the country. I think he was a very good public servant and national security advisor. And I think Bolton will be a very good national security advisor for President Trump. He has high-level experience at the State Department and at the UN. He understands the national security challenges facing the country as well as anyone else. He has a good relationship with the president, it seems, which is essential to be successful in this job. And he has good ties with the Republican establishment, may present an opportunity to heal some of the rifts in the party since the election, maybe bring in some more traditional foreign policy hands into the process. So it's not getting the attention of some of the more negative negative coverage, but many Republican foreign policy experts have been celebrating this appointment in the past 24 hours.
So it sounds like, Nancy McEldowney, the two of you coming from very different places. Why do you believe it's so bad, given what Matthew was just saying about how he really is more in the mainstream than people recognize?
Yeah, I think he is so far from the mainstream, and I disagree both on policy but also on personality. We have seen Bolton for years advocate the most extreme, the most militaristic positions possible. A preemptive strike against North Korea, a preemptive strike against Iran, regime change in both countries. Those are not things that are responsible policy courses for our country to look at. Secondly, his personality. We can come back to this, but the role of the National Security Advisor is someone who is supposed to bring all policy options to the table. That is not John Bolton. He is very argumentative, vindictive with those who disagree with him. And the reason he was never confirmed as Bush's nominee to be the U.S. ambassador to the UN was because of Republican opposition.
Well, Matthew Kroenig, let's divide those in two. Let's start with what Nancy McEldowney is describing as someone who has advocated for a more militaristic approach, a more aggressive approach abroad. But you're saying that's the right approach right now for this country?
The use of force has been an important tool of international diplomacy going back to the days of Thucydides, and a credible threat of military force often contributes to peace, contributes to successful diplomacy. There's a bipartisan consensus in the United States that the United States needs to keep the military option on the table for Iran and for North Korea. So I think it's good that we have a national security advisor who's willing to consider all options to advance U.S. national security interests. When it comes to his role as national security advisor, I think there are two models historically. One is the honest broker model that Brent Scowcroft really kind of perfected, of bringing all options to the president. But there's a second successful model too, and that's more the strategist role that Henry Kissinger played. And I suspect that Bolton will be a little bit more in the strategist role of having strong opinions. And I think which one works best really depends on the personalities involved and depends on the needs of the president. So I think he can be successful in this role.
What about the idea, Nancy McEldowney, that he's going to have strong opinions and that that's what's needed right now?
Well, there's no question that he's going to have strong opinions, and I'm not advocating for people not to express their opinion. But having worked on the National Security Council, the role of the person who whispers in the ear of the president, who is the most intimate advisor when the president is trying to deliberate, we know the direction that Bolton is going to go in. And we don't have to speculate about what he's going to do in the future because we've seen what he's done in the past. He was an ardent advocate for the Iraq War. He still claims that it was a brilliant decision. So I think people need to be very worried about the policy choices this national security advisor is going to advocate for.
Matthew Kronig, what about that?
Well, you know, I'm a political scientist by training. There's some good political science research on how advisors influence decisions of presidents. And what political scientists have found is that actually advisors are most influential when they argue against type. So that's why Colin Powell was so central to the debates over the Iraq War. People saw him as the cautious voice within the Bush administration. So when even he was willing to advocate for the war, people took notice.
Well, what are
so
you
Bolton
saying
is
that
known,
means? Go ahead. Yeah. What are you saying that means?
So what that means for Bolton is he's known for having tough views. So I think when he argues for these tough-minded policies, that's not going to come as a surprise. I think he'll be most influential when he argues for restraint. When even Bolton argues for restraint, that's when Trump is going to take notice.
I want to ask both of you finally, of course, it's John Bolton, National Security Advisor, but there's going to be a new Secretary of State. Everybody assumes Mike Pompeo gets confirmed. What do you see in terms of how the two of them work together? Nancy McEldowney.
It's clear to me that what Donald Trump is doing is assembling a war cabinet. He's got Pompeo, who is very much of a hawk, who has made a number of controversial statements while he was a member of Congress, and now coming in with a very sort of right-leaning, militaristic approach. Bolton carrying the same message from the NSC. And I think with those two taken together, we are in for a very bumpy ride, even though we have very senior members of our military, from the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, advocating in favor of a different approach.
Matthew Kronig, a war cabinet likely to take military action?
Well, part of the description there was a right-leaning cabinet, and yes, it is a right-leaning cabinet. There was election in the country and the Republicans won, and so there were Republican officials. You know, the Iran nuclear deal has been mentioned as one of the controversial issues that Pompeo and Bolton don't support. But let's remember, the Iran nuclear deal was incredibly controversial. There was bipartisan opposition. Every Republican in Congress and some Democrats opposed it. It was only the Obama administration and their supporters who supported it. So the idea that the Trump administration is taking another look at this makes a lot of sense. So again, controversial it seems in some circles, but many conservative foreign policy experts I've talked to is excited about this cabinet, one of the maybe strongest national security cabinets we've had in some time.
We're going to watch it all unfold. Matthew Kronig, Nancy McEldowney, we thank you both.
Thank you.